UFC 235 is absolutely stacked. We are very early in the 2019 and we're already about to embark on one of the greatest cards of the entire year. There are many things I'd really like to concentrate on this week. The Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith fight alone is something I could spend a great deal of time on. There are some kind of crazy odds in that fight, like 9-1 for Jones to win, which I actually don't have a problem with. It's perfectly justifiable when you look at this thing on paper. But there is something very intriguing that comes with the fight when you have such a large underdog. Everybody loves the underdog story, and anybody who has been following this sport for any amount of time knows that you always have to be ready for the apple cart to get tipped over at all times. And the next guy up always seems to be the perfect candidate to do just that. But I have to say that for me, the Jones versus Smith fight bears a striking resemblance to when Jones took on Glover Teixeira. He was going up against a very dangerous, very formidable opponent who was a lot more experienced and high level than what most fans realize, but still multiple levels behind Jones in terms of skill set. But I'm ready for Bones to come out and do what he always does, but I'm always prepared to be shocked as well. Zabit versus Jeremy Stephens is a high-profile fight that could easily be headlining a fight night or co-main eventing a big event, and it's on the prelims. Cody Garbrandt is competing this Saturday, and we have a welterweight title showdown between Tyron Woodley and Kamaru Usman on deck. It's been a really long time since we've had a card like this come along, so we've got a hell of a lot to look forward to Saturday night. But out of all the interesting bouts I just mentioned, the one on the docket that stands out in a big way is Ben Askren's unlikely and long-awaited UFC debut against former welterweight champion Robbie Lawler. When news broke that Askren would be joining the UFC roster, the former Olympian wasted no time taking to social media to start rattling some cages of the 170-pound division. Immediately, Funky had picked fights with the top names on the roster and caused a ruckus in all of our news feeds, all the while making plenty enemies along the way. Askren was suited to fight more than a few welterweights. It was going to be very interesting to see who he would be matched up with for his debut. And much to the dismay and surprise to a lot of fans and media, Askren didn't get paired up with any of the names he had in his mouth. In an unexpected move by the promotion, the matchmakers determined that it would be ruthless Robbie Lawler welcoming Askren to the UFC. There was a lot of disapproval about this amongst the fan base, according to most of the comments I've seen online anyway. Many thought it made no sense to make this fight because Askren had made no mention of Lawler at any point during his Twitter tirade. But guess what? The fighters aren't the matchmakers here. Somewhere along the way, over the past few years of being in the entertainment era of this sport, everybody's gotten used to fights being made from the callouts. Whether they're actual legitimate callouts from a post-fight interview or the type of callout that comes from an athlete firing off a couple tweets out into the universe. I really like this move by the UFC because it's a reminder to both the fighters and the fans that while the athletes have the ability to heavily influence who they match up with, ultimately the control is not in their hands. Manufacturing these beefs is fine and all, but at the end of the day, it's all meaningless when that cage door shuts. So I like the importance being taken off of all the drama and nonsense surrounding the debut of Askren and it just being about the athletic competition and nothing else. Because that's always been the story about Askren, hasn't it? He's been a dominant force outside of the UFC for years. The guy's undefeated in 19 fights. That's very impressive no matter what context it's in. Going 19 fights in a row without a loss as an amateur would be incredibly rare and an amazing feat. Doing it as a professional, as Askren has, is truly amazing, and he deserves every bit of hype he has behind him. And although some tend to not love his fighting style, it's the sport, man. You gotta be able to stop him from imposing his will on you, plain and simple. I actually enjoy his fights, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him in the octagon. But I don't think he has ever faced anyone like Robbie Lawler. The promotion did not lob Askren a softball to kick things off, to say the least. In fact, I think they intentionally put him in a really tough position that nobody saw coming, and that's what makes this fight so damn interesting. Askren's athletic career is impressive. He's no stranger to having to perform on a big stage, but he's never fought in the UFC octagon before, and I think there's something to be said for that. I'm not suggesting that he's going to be dwarfed by the moment, but I'm not here claiming he's going to rise to the occasion either. Anybody who's been following this sport for any period of time knows that the UFC is a different animal altogether. And time again, we've seen the effect it can have on certain fighters. Most everyone who makes their debut is affected by the fact that they're fighting in the UFC. Whether they be a regional fighter on the undercard or a highly touted new signee, for better or for worse. There's no real storyline or artificial drama involved in Askren's debut, just a good old-fashioned competition between two athletes to finally determine where Askren stands. He wants to prove he can beat the best guys in the world? Well, here's his opportunity.